YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
Okay, sounds good.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are watching from. I'm Anissa Teron with a very husky voice here today. So bear with me. I am going to probably let Jamila do most of the talking today. And we'd like to welcome Caurel Richards. So grateful to have you here, all the way from Winnipeg, Canada, but originally from Jamaica.
Yes.
So before I start reading her bio, please welcome Jamila and welcome Caurel.
Hello.
Welcome, everyone. Anissa, are you sure you're fine with reading the bio? Do you want me to read it today, seeing that you are not feeling that great?
Please,
Yes,
please,
and
please
just like
go
to
ahead. Yeah.
Corel as well from my side, and we're really excited to have you with us and spend this hour with us and to hear all about your story and to help us rewrite ours, I think. So let me just get into a quick introduction of Corel. Corel is an expert hypnotherapist and transformation catalyst with 16 years of dynamic experience in logistics, supply chain management, and international business. Blending sharp corporate insight with therapeutic mastery, Corel is your go to guide for breaking free from emotional blocks and leveling up your life. She's been through the high stakes, high pressure grind and knows exactly how to turn your corporate hustle into personal breakthroughs. I love that. From conquering procrastination to banishing self doubt, Corel's strategies help to reclaim your power. Corel's unapologetically bold, powerful, and refreshingly playful approach is a breath of fresh air indeed. And if you're looking for the ultimate hub of transformation, dive into the unfiltered experience. Looking forward to hearing more about that. An exclusive go to space packed with resources, insights, and unfiltered truths designed for high performers ready to trade stress for success. It's not just about what you need to do, it's about who you need to become. So we're excited, we're ready to rewrite our stories, Corel. And thank you so much for being here. I'll hand it over to you.
Well, hello, everybody. Can't see you guys, but I can sense you. I'm excited to be here. Just to not only share my story, because I think we're all storytellers in our own little ways. But I think what is most importantly is how you're sharing your story and how you're showing up in that story will essentially dictate kind of what life looks like and how you navigate life. So I'm ready to jump into that. Yay.
Please do, please do. Like, I mean, when we post this about searching for candidates or speakers or guests, we always say, come and tell us your hero's journey story. So maybe start when you got that call to adventure. You accepted the yes to take on the quest, right? But at
Oh
first you
boy.
were uncomfortable. So please start there and tell us a bit more about that.
My hero's journey. I think we're always on that journey, so it's never really done and over with. Mine started, I think, just entering this world. If I'm going to be honest with you, the adventure, I've always been one that loves to explore and I've been curious about life. And sometimes that curiosity got in my way. But nonetheless, I think what really propels me or what really pushed me to really take this seriously and more intentional was when I didn't feel good being here. It was exhausting. It was just all the anxiety. I would just have random panic attacks. And I felt out of control. And I don't know if you can relate to just feeling out of control in your life where things are just happening and you just kind of go with it because that's just what you were kind of taught. It's just, this is life. This is just what it comes with. And I have a rebellious spirit, I won't lie. And I was like, there's no way in hell that this is what my life is going to be. And I think it's when I got to about 28, I decided that, okay, I've always been in this environment, being from Jamaica, traveling back and forth to different countries. but I wanted to explore the option of being in a different environment, because I think wholeheartedly that your environment can dictate how you see the world and how you perceive the world. And I've always been in that environment. So I wanted to try something different. Hence why I'm in Canada right now. And coming to Canada, you hear different things, you have different experiences, and I'm all about the experience. And I recognized that I was having a completely different experience, but I was still having the same response. So I'm like, okay, so I've changed the environment and I'm still responding to life the same way. There has got to be something else that I don't know, because you don't know what you don't know. And I think it was my first panic attack here, being in a high pressured environment, working 4 days on and off, and a panic attack just hit me. And I'm just like, well, I'm not in Jamaica anymore, so why am I still having panic attacks? And when I mentioned it to my supervisor, she said to me, well, just go to therapy. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? You want me to do what? What is that? What is even a panic attack? What is even anxiety? You hear these words and you don't necessarily know what they mean until somebody explains it to you. And I think going to traditional therapy it was the opening. It was that door opening for me to understand what was going on and get a better way of navigating this thing that was happening and was taking over my life and making me feel out of control. And that was when I stepped in and started therapy. But it didn't necessarily stop there. It was just, like I said, it was me testing the waters. And I think that's kind of where things started for me at that point.
Wow, that's amazing, Caurel. And what a brave step for you to move from one country to continent to another. It doesn't come easy, does it? It comes with a whole lot of challenges whilst you're still dealing with a lot of other things. You don't seem to agree with me. Was it a relatively seamless, easier process for you?
It was for me. I've always, like I said, had an adventurous spirit. So challenges, adversities, it fuels me in a very strange way. So it was just like, okay, let's jump into this. Let's see what's the worst that could happen? I can always go back home. It didn't happen, by the way, but there was always that cushion, I suppose. It's like, I can always go back home if this doesn't work. And thankfully it worked, because what I believe I have is an open mind, right? I don't hold on so firmly to what this should be. I need it to be that way. It was just okay, what do I need to do to navigate this differently so I can have the full experience? And I think that's something that's innate in me. It's not something that I needed to be taught. It just is a part of who I am. So it made it easier just moving to Canada and having this full experience and thinking about actually going back home with all of these tools, all of this knowledge, all of this wisdom that I gained from living here for almost 10 years, by the way.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible, because I think that we all have these preconceived notions that our story is just one story, and that's the story that we are meant to have from birth right, through to when we depart again.
Yeah.
But what I love about what you're saying is that our story is whatever it is that we choose to write.
Yes.
We hold the pen with which we can channel whichever way we want to move in this world, whichever way we expect our life to turn out. Anissa, one of our banks has a tagline or a brand promise. ABSA Bank has the brand promise of saying that your story matters. And I absolutely love that, because it is so true that our stories matter. But it's really important to take from Caurel the understanding that at any point in time, you can rewrite your story. You can tell it or narrate it in a way that you choose to, and it doesn't have to be governed by anyone else or any other circumstances. If you decide that you want a complete change, if you decide that you want to just move to another continent, then that's in your power to do, isn't it? So yeah, that's lovely takeaway already, I think, from the discussion with you, Caurel, is that
Yeah.
you hold the pen to narrate the story as you wish.
Yeah, I think that's very important. And it's not special to me, right? I definitely am sharing my story today, but my story isn't only special to me. I think having that pen and writing your own story is offered and given to each and every one of us. It's, what do you decide to write? How do you decide to write it? And what role you decide to play in that story? As I started the conversation, I said, we're all storytellers. I think the story that you start to tell yourself from the beginning is how you will actually show up. So if you think that you're not good enough, you're going to show up as if you're not good enough. If you feel like you're not confident, you are going to show up like you're not confident. So it's really understanding the story that you're walking around with, and understanding that the experiences that you're having isn't because of somebody else. It's because of you. It starts within you. That seed has been planted because of you. And it's now taking responsibility, knowing that if it started with me, then that must mean I can change that.
Absolutely.
That is, taking responsibility means, oh, my ability to respond to what's going on and deciding if it isn't in alignment with where I want to go and who I want to be, then it's time to change that story.
Okay, great. And give us a little bit of background on logistics and supply chain management and international business, and how that has migrated to hypnotherapy and becoming a transformational catalyst.
Good
Fill us in.
question. Very good question. It's so funny. I grew up with a background in just loving to try new things, loving to try things when they don't work. So I went from, and if any of my friends are listening to this, they know I started, my first degree I wanted to do was biochemistry, then marine biology, and then those weren't working out. I was like, okay, well, this isn't working. Let's try something else. And then went into logistics and supply chain management. And I was like, okay, this feels a little good. Okay, I think this is okay. I think I can navigate this. And when I did graduate in Jamaica, I ended up coming directly to Canada as a result of, just, again, the environment. And once I got here through a different process, I didn't just come here and just said, hey, we're going to just live in Canada. I went to school here for a year and I studied international business. So when I started out in logistics here in Canada, it's high pressure. Like, things have to run smoothly. So they expect you, and I can say within myself, I expected myself to be perfect, right? Perfect, because if you slip up, a freight can end up in Winnipeg when it's supposed to end up in Vancouver. So there's so much expectation, and you sit there and you're like, okay, did I make a mistake? And you start to doubt yourself, and it just turns into this big, frustrating experience, especially when you have other things going on, right? Because it's not like you're in a bubble. You're not just working and you're just isolated to work. You have family life, you have friends, you're growing. I was still late 20s and I still didn't know me. So I was just kind of going on a whim and figuring out what works right now. And at some point, it just stopped working. It's like your mind was just tired of always going and being stressed. And even though I can admit that high pressure environments somehow bring out the best in me, long term, it wasn't good for my body. It wasn't good for me as a person. And in the end, they decided, because they ended up letting me go. I was like, okay. I was happy about it. And I was like, okay, well, what's the next move now? And then because I was going through all of that explosion in my head, is what I call it, the panic attacks and the anxiety, I was like, okay, I need to figure out me. Because if I don't figure out me, this is going to happen again. And that's when I decided to really take therapy seriously. But it wasn't traditional talk therapy. It was hypnotherapy. When I stumbled into Marissa Peer, And then COVID happened, and we kind of just went through that, understood that, oh, so it's my childhood trauma that's making me behave like this. It's the expectations that I thought my parents had for me. It's the expectation that I thought society had for me that I have all here just, ruminating and thinking that I wasn't doing a good job. I wasn't good enough. There was something different about me. Why? And I was like, okay, I'm tired of this now. And therapy really helped me, and especially hypnotherapy, because it gets right to the problem, right to the root of it. And in figuring that out, here I am now, a hypnotherapist myself.
Caurel, I must admit that every time I hear somebody's done hypnotherapy, it's something that I would love to go and do or attempt, but at the same time, I have all these fears around it. Tell us your experience when you went the first time to do the hypnotherapy as the end recipient of the therapy.
Interesting question. I don't know if my experience will be everyone else's experience. And I understand the fear, because I know there is this stigma attached to it, because it feels as if somebody's going in to take over and tell you how to live your life, make you walk away quacking like a duck. All these things are out here. And it was nothing like that. Because it is very similar to meditation. I don't know if you guys have ever meditated. It's sitting there and the thoughts are coming, but instead of pushing the thoughts away or saying or judging the thoughts, you are actually examining the thoughts, right? So essentially, when you start out, it's really just to relax your body, to relax your mind, and allow for it to give you the answers that you need, right? So I went in initially with, what was the first thing that I went in with? Let's just say I went in not feeling like I wasn't good enough. And what happens is that we're saying, okay, you come into this world expecting to be loved, to be respected, to be significant. Where did this belief start from of you feeling like you're not good enough? And then your mind miraculously and automatically just gives you a scene. And it shows you, hey, when your dad decided to leave and go to the States, my dad, that is, left to go to the States when I was 2, having him, he was always everything to me. And him just leaving, my interpretation of him leaving was that I wasn't good enough. I did something wrong. And because I did something wrong, I am wrong and I am bad and I should be shameful. And that is how we interpret things as children. It's not, we don't see the logics of it. We don't see it as, oh, they're just going to, look for a better life or to just, do whatever it is that they're doing. We think about it from the standpoint that it's because we did something. And because we're so egocentric, that's where the story starts. So we're back to storytelling.
Yes.
That's where the story starts.
So
So when someone walks away from me in a relationship, it's, oh, I did something bad. I wasn't good enough. And you start to, criticize and you start to judge yourself, when the thing is, maybe that person was just not compatible with you.
Yeah. I can relate to that, Caurel.
Sorry?
I can relate to it in so many ways, because one, I didn't grow up with my dad, but there was always that feeling of, well, he didn't know I existed either, so you can't really blame him, right, in this context. But there's that abandonment.
Yes.
And so you end up abandoning yourself in the process throughout your relationships or within the different environments. So when you said earlier on that you left Jamaica and came to Canada, and the same thing happened again, but the environment has shifted, I understood that and resonated with that quite deeply, because I had to also realize very much, where am I? I'm the common denominator here. So which means that I need to introspect and look within instead of project out into the world, because that view or the lens of you're not good enough is just an assumed adaptation that we take on. And as you rightfully say, that's where the narration starts and builds on. And whether it's true or not, we don't know until we accept that quest to do the work.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, Anissa. We can go anywhere in the globe. We can, but we're going there with ourselves. So it doesn't matter what the environment is like. It's about you and what your internal environment is that will change who you are, how you respond, how you react to things. And I think that you did say that you keep on coming back to your story, but our story is not just our story. Our story is because of other stories as well and how they impact on us.
Absolutely.
And when we look at our parents, and if we go into our our lineage, then we realize certain things that have been passed down to us, and they're not just physical traits like eye color or hair color or body shape or whatever it is that's being passed down to us. What's also being passed down are their stories
Yeah.
and how that impacts on us.
Whew. That's a big one. That
Yeah.
is a big one because I think our egos, our egos are very fragile as human beings. And I think because of what was poured into us, because it's almost like when we got here, it was an empty glass. And like you said, those stories that our parents or grandparents, they poured that into us, not sometimes intentionally, sometimes just by being and having their own experience. And because we take those on without knowing to question them or to examine them if they're even true, we just start living the same lives that they lived, not recognizing that we have the choice to be like, well, that didn't feel good. Do I want to hold on to that? And I think the responsibility is for us to, I know it's easy to say, well, my mom did this, my dad did that, but most of them weren't doing it with the intention to harm us, right? I don't know what parent wants to, and someone might be out there that says otherwise. I don't know what parent wants to go through the experience of having a child to harm them intentionally, right? And it's to stop and think objectively, if they weren't trying to harm me, then what was really going on? Oh, they had their own stuff. Okay, they haven't matured emotionally, because I think that's the big one. It's many of us have not matured emotionally because that wasn't a focus. The
Yeah.
focus was, we got to make sure the finances are good. You got to have the roof over our head, food on the table. They're not thinking about how you're feeling and how you're interpreting this. You're thinking about just surviving, right? So in knowing that today, then this is where you step in and like, well, if their focus wasn't that, how can I now focus on my emotional maturity, my emotional responsibility, and go from there? Because that part is just as important as me being financially stable.
Correct. And you drew on the analogy of an a full cup, or an empty cup. We arrive here as an empty cup, and I find that I've got a totally different perspective on that. I feel that when we do arrive here, we arrive full. We
Yeah.
arrive enriched. We arrive divine. We arrive empowered. And what happens is that slowly, we decide to remove from that glass and keep on removing to make the people, the environment more comfortable for others so that they would accept who we are. So I'll shine a little bit dimmer.
Yeah.
I won't be so out there. Okay, maybe I won't want to be so ambitious and attain this or that or whatever it is. And as people pleasers, we do this quite willingly because it's more important for us to make sure that others are more comfortable than we are. And for me, I find at this stage in my life, from giving and giving and giving up, I'm finding my vessel is now empty.
Got it.
And I think that when you get to a point where you want to do the work, where you are looking in and you're introspective now, because you realize that it ends with me,
Yeah.
then you start to take back and start filling up the vessel again so that it redeems itself to its original power, which is the
Yeah.
power of the divine. And that's how I prefer to see it, because this is what we're here to unlearn a lot
Yeah.
and to relearn what it is that we've already been given.
Yeah. I love that perspective. I'm glad that you shared that.
Thank you. Yeah, and like you say, the buck stops with you. It ends with you. It ends with your decision to look within yourself and to decide that I'm no longer going to be upset with Mary or Joe or whatever because they did this, that, and the other. How can I take back my power and make sure that I change my circumstances? I respond differently. Because if I bring it back to myself and keep on asking me, what is it that I've done to get myself into this situation, then I can change that.
Yes, absolutely. That's a very good question, because I think it might be different, or the way that we show up might be different in how we take responsibility. But at the same time, under the umbrella, or the umbrella really is just being honest with ourselves. It really genuinely starts with you being honest. And it's not just because it's so easy to see the beauty in ourselves, but it's the messy parts. When we see the messy parts in the mirror and we have to call ourselves out and say, hey, that wasn't so okay. We don't like to do that, right? We don't. And if we can admit that right now, first step. But in admitting that, understanding that you are keeping yourself stuck. When you continue to lie to yourself and be delusional, you are going to stay exactly where you are, because there's no space to move at that point, because you've lied to yourself. And in lying, where do you go? Where do you go? So it really starts with honesty and saying, hey, maybe this behavior is unacceptable. And if it's unacceptable, how can I do better? And it's going to shoot your ego. I'm not even going to lie to you. It's going to rub on that ego and say you're not good enough and all of these things. But you know what? That isn't true. Because the fact that you can look yourself in the mirror and say, hey, I did this and it was wrong, and sit in that for a little bit, because it's going to be uncomfortable. And then beyond that, what then? There's so much more out there than the lie that you've told yourself. There's so much more out there than the delusion that you're stuck in. And that is why I think a lot of us don't move, or we're stuck in being resentful, is because we're not willing to hold the truth and sit in that uncomfortable truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Spot
And
on.
uncomfortable
Tell me
it is,
something.
Lisa. It's really uncomfortable, and it takes an individual to really muster up the courage and be brave about it, to confront yourself, to look yourself in the mirror and say, okay, you know what? I have to be authentic here, and I have to call myself out on my part of being in the situation for what it is.
Yeah.
No, what I wanted to ask you is this. I went off for a while because my Wi-Fi stopped working for some reason. But did you cover what the unfiltered experience means? Was this part of that discussion? Or is
No,
this
we can jump
alluding
right into it
to
right
that?
now.
Yes, because I'm getting a sense that the context of what you're describing is that raw, unfiltered, just sitting in the mud with yourself in order
Yeah.
to come out as that beautiful lotus flower in the end. But you have to be prepared to get dirty. Is
Yeah.
this the unfiltered experience? And when did you connect to it? And what was your unfiltered experiences?
Oh boy.
Not
I think I've
experience.
always been unfiltered to a fault sometimes. My friends say, Caurel, maybe you could have kept that, And I'm like, you know what? I think being unfiltered, being raw isn't acceptable in society. And it isn't acceptable because, give me 1 second. It isn't acceptable because it causes pain, right? It causes people to feel things that maybe they don't want to address. And because we often project, because it's easier to throw it at someone else, point the finger at someone else, than to sit in the muddiness. So when I would say it, it would just be like a pushback sometimes, In fact, most times it would be a pushback. And I think that's what society does, is when we actually call it for what it is, society says, hey, no, we don't need to talk about that. No, you're being this, you're being that. When the truth, well, do you not want to move from where you are? Do you not want us to have a solution? And I think if we don't start being unfiltered when the time is right, because timing is a thing too, and to have tact, I've learned that in the last couple of months. If we can find a balance in speaking the truth, things will improve in this human experience. Because I'm, like I said, I'm about the experience. Things are not going to always be good. I need you to let that go right now. Things will not all, it's not a utopia. We didn't come here for a utopia, guys. We came here to have the human experience, and the human experience involves a little pain. But you know what it doesn't necessarily need to involve is suffering. And again, pain is definitely a part of life, but suffering is always a choice. Always a choice. How long do you sit in this and not make changes so that you don't suffer any longer? What are some of the things that you're doing? What are some of the things that you're not doing? What are some of the things you're saying? What are some of the things that you're not saying that is causing you to stay in the suffering? Those are introspective questions you have to ask yourself, because I promise you, it's not everybody else, it's you.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly on that one. And it's a difficult uh, understanding to come to, or to admit to, Anissa. And I found that with me, I always wanted things to be so perfect. I always felt that I was, to a certain extent, a victim of circumstances and all the rest of it. But in trying to make sure that you want to get out of that stereotype, and in trying to make a success of your life, I was on autopilot all the time. And it never got me to connect with myself. And I think it took quite a traumatic experience for me to come to that revelation or realization to say, hold on, stop, exhale, and look at what you have here within you. And look at all the things that are not the way that they should be, and how can you start to change this to be on a more successful path, or a more authentic path of your life.
Caurel, I want to ask you something, because you're 10 years in Canada.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you're married and have kids. We didn't even cover those conversations here, or we just literally met 10 minutes before go live, people. So in case you're wondering, we don't have anything scripted. But I'm just wondering, because on this journey of life that we call wild and unfiltered, sometimes we do feel alone, and then we go into the suffering. And for you being in a foreign country, right, that feeling of isolation was probably even much more intensified. But who did you have, or did you not feel that isolation?
I didn't. I might be one of the odd ones, and I'm okay with that. I look at life in a very interesting way. I look at life as a gift. And every day that I get to be a part of this gift or have this gift, I use it wisely. So I never necessarily felt isolated unless there was something that I wasn't being truthful about. And like I said, I'm one that loves to just be very direct. So if I had to say something, first of all, I spoke to myself a lot. And that didn't make me crazy. Because I think the best people to have conversations with is the people that know you very well. And I know me very well today. When I got here, not so much, but in having the conversation with me and getting the answers and understanding me more, I was able to see clearer and perceive clearer and make better choices as to who I would allow to enter into my life. And I think that is what made it a little bit easier, is I did my best with what I had to be as authentic, and the people that I got to experience, or who got to experience me, they either chose to stay or I chose to keep them around because of the experience that we were having. And that experience wasn't one of beautifulness at all times. I was challenged. I had conflict, and I had to learn, because before I just run away from the conflict, I had to learn over time what conflict resolution looked like. It wasn't just keeping what was going on with them in me. It was sharing it with them and saying, hey, when you did this, this is how I responded. And it was learning how to even communicate when there were where there was conflict and challenges. And I'm still learning today. And I think when I have the perfect person that I'm thinking about, it's not easy at first, but if it's worth it in the end, the person is gonna go. We're gonna go through that roller coaster of a ride. And in the end, you look back and be like, man, that was hard, but I'm glad I stuck it out. I'm glad that I know you and understand you better, and vice versa. And there's joy after the mess. It's like I said, it wasn't easy at first, but it was sure as hell worth it, because you have people around you that see you, that hear you, even when you're not saying anything. And that's beautiful. I don't think a lot of people experience that, where you don't have to say anything and they know what's going on. They know what's going on because my silence is a little bit louder than when I'm speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I just had a moment. Let me just sit in that for a little bit. Wow.
Yeah. It's always great to have people around you who hold that space for you, where
Yeah.
you don't have to just say anything, you don't have to do anything, but that's that sense of understanding and acceptance, and almost a knowing that everything's going to be okay.
Yeah. And they don't have to think the way that you think. They don't have to experience the world the way how you experience it. And still there's a respect, there's a mutual respect. There's the judgment isn't there. And even if there is judgment, because we're humans and we're flawed, it's, oh, I judge you for that. And I'm sorry. I was thinking of it from my perspective and not thinking about you. And it's having those difficult conversations, right? Because I think, especially when we're dealing with other people, we look at the world the way how we live it, and we don't take into consideration that they're living it differently. So we go in and we project onto them, right? And then we discount everything that they've experienced without considering that maybe this is how they need to show up right now, and that's okay. It's not long term, it's just right now and in this moment.
Mm. Yeah. I love the aspect about, saying that we understand what you're going through. It may not be the way that I might do it, but just that sense of non-judgment.
Yeah.
And I think that stems from just being in a space where you don't judge yourself first and foremost, where you can then extend that onto anyone else that's around you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have a couple of friends that when they come to my house where I'm at right now, they say, when I come here, for whatever reason, I just feel as if I'm safe. Like, it's like they get away from the world, the noise, the chaos. And then when they come here, it's just like, yeah, I can just be me, like my flawed, my raw self, and know that you're going to check me. Yes, I am. I am going to check you, but I'm going to check you in a very loving way for you to understand that I see your potential. And I see that, yes, you're speaking from a space of pain, and that sometimes that voice sounds different as opposed to the objective, more rational version of you. But there's space for both. It doesn't have to always be that one. There's space for all the versions of you, and that's okay.
And you say you have any comments to make? Seems like you're battling a little bit technically.
No. So I'm switching off as I'm sneezing and as I'm blowing my nose in between. For those that wondering why my camera's going on and off, it's not technical difficulty. It's this husky voice difficulty. And then I'm going into the cockpit. So this version of me is wanting to show up. And I suppose when let's talk about that for a moment, because sometimes we want to show up when we're actually not supposed to show up. Like today, I wasn't supposed to show up here. And so, there's a lesson in that too. We tend to want to always be in top form. We always want to show up, and sometimes it's not about that. It's just showing up your ugly self, your your difficult self, your the pain, the turmoil. And right now there is a tumultuous period that lies ahead for me. So I think,
Yeah.
if I look at it, it's your immune system will be under attack when you start to. Somebody has just said on the, I don't know who that is, Oh Natural. I don't know if you know them, Jamila, on Instagram. They said, wisdom of groups so appreciated. Thank you. Thank you for being here and for the others that are sitting on the Instagram. But yeah, coming back to the point of sometimes when we are going through difficulty, I was prompted today to write a post on, like I always do, but we're always wanting to write posts as if, well, not me, I like to call it what it is, and I'm really raw and real on social media. And as you said, society doesn't always like that. So
Nope.
for me, I wanted to write about the fact that I'm sitting in this turmoil, this my immune system's under attack, because those are the stories we should be sharing. We shouldn't be sharing only that we're sitting in this beautiful space all the time and this toxic positivity. It's not true.
It's
Like
not
for us as
real.
coaches, it's not real. You as an expert hypnotherapist, Jamila as a coach, we too go through and grow through life. And it is that unfiltered experience. And I mean, Jamila has some context around all the things that are sitting on my radar. And yet, I still show up. And somebody said to me, I don't know who it was, but no, my 9-year-old, here's what he said to me. Mom, don't you think God is testing you right now? And he said, isn't this test asking of you that you must just rest? Don't go do that coaching call. Don't go. And I was like, what? The wisdom coming from a 9-year-old is like, okay.
I
And
think you're
so, because
proving
they are,
Amelia's point where she said, we come already full, so he came with that wisdom to give to you.
exactly, because they are in their purest essence. They are unfiltered.
Yep.
So that's really what I wanted to share from my side. It's we don't always need to be showing up in top form. You're going
Yeah.
through difficulty, speak it, but don't stay in the suffering of it. Embrace it, acknowledge it. I don't have a pity party for myself for too long. I do allow the emotions, but I don't stay there. Whereas
Yeah.
before, I would like, oh no, I'm not allowed to feel this. I can't be the victim. I need to be victorious and strong. And I'm like, oh no, that's a lie. It's a facade. It's truly a
Yeah.
facade. So that's all I want to share. And I'm going to switch off again because I need to drink some water.
I agree so much with what Anissa has said. And
Yeah.
what I've realized is that, when you're going through the challenges of life and when you do come out the other side, it's been a hell of a road and you go through the worst and all the rest of it. And then you find yourself in a similar scenario not too long later on. And you think to yourself, why me, all of the bad things, I've got bad luck on me or whatever, I'm cursed and things like that. And then you find that you go through it and you move through it again. And what I've realized is that in experiencing this, because it's like you said, life isn't just beautiful all the time. We're not all on a high all the time. We're going to have our lows and our dips and all the rest of it. But for me, I think that in my journey, I've now come to a point where I've accepted that. I accepted that it's not all going to be fun and success and on a high all the time. And I also don't allow myself to let that panic set in when I'm going through the challenges, because I know from my history that I have overcome. And now I learn each time to bring on more tools that help me to move through the challenge a lot quicker than maybe the last time. So it's a journey, It's a road that we go on every day, and each day we try to equip ourselves with more armor to help us to get through the situations. But what I found that this has also done for me is, in this realization, it has helped me to attract the people that are meant to be in my space, to help me along and push me along when those uphill battles are a little bit too difficult and you feel like you're going to be crushed by that rock. And this is the beauty of the journey for me,
Yeah.
is in uncovering or just relearning about the power and strength that you have as an individual on your own, that we have been granted this gift, and also the absolutely incredible people that you attract whilst you get to that particular frequency, and
Yeah.
continue to move on towards that. um, and what I wanted to also speak on is, when I was reading your bio, Anissa, I just find that there's so many people that we have attracted in our space who have come from corporate backgrounds and are now on this journey of finding who they are, and their true selves, and getting onto this deeper understanding of their life, and where they the perspective of where they are at the moment. And it was the same with you, Anissa, same with you. And I don't know whether this is actually meant for you, um, meant to send more messages to you about your transition, and to know
Caurel.
that
Divine
Jamila's
timing.
hitting the nail. She's hitting the nail on the head, because when COVID happened, I had to, redirect, and I managed to go and find the path of what I studied 15 years ago, which is my coaching, right? And which is what I feel is my calling. But being a single mom of three and having to provide for that kids and put a roof over their head and do all of the stuff, I'm almost having to potentially go back into corporate now. So I'm sitting here with this like, oh my gosh, your bio was kind of speaking to all of this that I'm having to potentially transition into. But I know it's not my truth. So I'm like this conundrum. And so there's a part in your bio where we spoke about, who do you need to become? Because who am I going to become to go back into that space? Is it going to be my authentic self, or is it my survival self that needs to put food on the table?
There you go.
So
Good
I want you to
question.
respond to that, Caurel.
For you in particular, or for the general public?
For the
Huh?
general, because I'm
For the
sure for the
general.
general, not just me. Many people are having to make these transitions, because let's think about the economy where it is globally and where the world is globally. It is a very doom and gloom picture. But if we
Yeah.
stay in that mindset, we will almost follow the masses. So, what do we say to the audience that's here that is in this difficult transition where you can't actually survive just on your income, even not even just my experience or my scenario? Many people are having to do more than one.
I think the thought that comes to me automatically, my mom is calling me. The thought that is coming to me automatically is, we have to change what survival looks like, or what survival means. And that's because I think over time, survival has turned into excess. Like, we are so used to having so much, that because so much is being threatened right now, it's like, oh, I have to go back into survival mode, when the truth is you have more than enough. It might not feel that way based on whatever experiences you have leading up to this point. But if we sit objectively and look into our situations, because you're not the only one. I can sit here and honestly say that there was a point where I didn't know if staying here in Canada was the best decision. And I'd made the decision to leave. I'm planning on leaving in a year, because that's the best decision for what I am presently going through, right? So I think it's important for you to look at your situation, look at where you need to go and what is important to you, what it is that you're prioritizing, And in choosing that is making those decisions that align with that. Because I think we have beliefs that, okay, well, if I downgrade, if I move, if I do all of these changes, that people are going to perceive me in a certain way. And that's going to take away from who I've always been or who I am today. When you know what, that might not be even the truth. It could be that you're actually moving more towards who you're supposed to be as opposed to who you think you're supposed to be. And I think survival clouds our judgment. So once that kicks in, and it's a biological response, right? So it's not a you thing, it's a biological response, right? Your amygdala right now is activated. You feel fearful. You're going back to, well, if I don't have enough, then I'm going to die. We're not in that age anymore. You're not going to die. You're not going to die. I promise. You'll get the support that you need from people. And that's something that I've always had a hard time with, is getting support from others, because my experience with support wasn't the greatest. So now that I'm getting support, I'm building that muscle that you were saying before, where it's okay. It gets easier and easier when those moments come that I might need the support, to ask for the support. It might not be financially, it might just be a helping hand. It might be a whatever it is. It's figuring out what's important. I know my purpose. I know what I'm here to do. And if being in Canada isn't a part of that anymore, then I have to make that decision. So it's wherever you want to go. If making that change, and I'm going to use Anissa because she's here and she expressed, if your purpose is leading you a certain way, is going back to corporate a part of that? Because sometimes our egos get in, because I've always said, I don't want to work for anybody again. But what if I do have to work for somebody again to get to my purpose? I'm going to do it because that is a part of where I'm going. It's not about me anymore. It's bigger than me. It's about the purpose. So if you're focused on that, you'll make some decisions that might look a little strange looking out from the outside in, but it's the perfect decision for where you're headed.
Thank you. That was beautifully said. Very beautifully said. So it's a detour in the process towards the greater purpose. In summary, if that's how I understood it.
Yeah.
And I think you made a very relevant point there. It's about finding your purpose. And once you've found your purpose, you may not necessarily have all the tools that you need to be able to execute it to the best of your ability. And that's where I think the detour comes in, Anissa, because who you were maybe 15 years ago as a life coach to who you are today are polar opposites apart. And now is the time for you to re-engage on that platform because of who you've become. And now, and I always believe in this, that it's all about the timing. Everything happens at the exact right time that it's meant to. And anytime we try to force anything, that never ever pans out the way that we expect. But I think that you are in a space now, Anissa, where you are so powerful, you are so confident in who you are and the truth in which you stand in, that you're ready now to take that next step.
Yeah.
And I think maybe
Thank
this
you,
is
ladies.
just
Maybe I was
last...
supposed to join today to lift my spirit. Oh my gosh. We're going to go back, redirect back to our guest, Caurel, because this was never meant to be about Anissa, but I'm receiving it because Caurel said earlier on something also important. When you don't know how to receive it, it's also very difficult to ask for it. And when when you do receive it, it's like, oh, shite, what's this all about? So I'm going to receive that and accept it. And Jamila, that was really heartfelt because in an interview this week, I did say to the person, they were saying, I did get some feedback and there's great feedback about you, but I heard that you're very tenacious and you don't know when to stop and say no. And I was like, yes, but that was 7 years ago. I'm a different Anissa now. So I'm going to end with the Anissa there and redirect back to Caurel and say, Who did you have to become, Caurel? Because that's the end of your bio. Who did you have to become or come back to? Because I don't feel we become someone else.
Yeah.
I think it's a matter of who do we have to come back to
Yeah.
come back home to that divine souls that we were before. Like Jamila said, we always came here as a full cup, a full vessel.
Oh boy, that's good. I like that. I'm gonna steal that. I'm gonna update my bio and put come back to, because that's exactly what it was for me. I've always been outspoken, and I think over the years I got a little bit quiet. You know, I dimmed what I had to say because it was, you know, it's better to be seen and not heard was the belief that I had. And that belief isn't aligned with where I'm supposed to be going. Right. So I had to return back to that little girl that heard, okay, well, you should just be seen and not heard. And I had to speak to her and say, hey, no, you have something quite important to say. And if you're not saying it, you're actually robbing the people that are waiting for you to say it. You're robbing the people that need to hear what you have to say. And it's no longer, of course, within means, we're not going to get too extreme here because I can be. It's saying it when it needs to be said and also saying it a little bit more compassionately. And I think I had to learn the compassion piece first, which is probably, and which is why I look at that experience where I was told to be seen and not heard. I don't look at it as a terrible thing anymore, because I think I got quiet enough in order to learn compassion to now return back to her with the compassion, because I could be very direct and not think about people's feelings and how they can take it, and at the same time now understand that it's necessary, because they're not going to hear it if it's painful, right? They're not going to hear it if you're just throwing it at them any old way. So I think it was very necessary the way that it turned out. Now I can say what I need to say with compassion. So that is who I became. And I have an appreciation for her. Love you, girl.
That's
Beautiful.
amazing. That's wonderful. So it's so beautiful to listen to. And we all have our own come beings to come back to. But it's in the realization that this is what we need. This is where we need to be. This is how still we need to be, so that we can identify it, so that we can accept it and receive it. Anissa, I don't know, how's that experience been for you? For me, it's been the other way around. I was always that shy, quiet one that didn't want to be seen. And my lesson was quite the opposite, where I had to give my permission to stand up and to shine my light. What's yours been,
It's
Anissa?
interesting. You know, ladies, it's so interesting that when I was growing up, I was always too much of this, too much, too loud, too friendly, too all of the above. And then for the most part of my life, I tried to be heard and seen and understood and acknowledged and all of that. But now I'm in a stage of my life where I don't feel like I need to be the voice in the room, or I don't need to feel like my presence need to be felt, because I'm connected to my own presence. I'm connected to my own voice. So I think that that's been my greatest lesson, is that the moment you feel like abandoned or rejected because you're not getting a seat or a voice at the table, that's a mirror reflecting back at you to go and introspect. But when you don't need to take up space because you are very comfortable within your space, your inner space, the outer space doesn't matter anymore. So it's interesting for me that most of the life, my life, I wanted all of that and seeked recognition. And I always went above and beyond, the pleaser, the hero, rescuer, savior. And now it's like, oh no, wait. I am going to establish boundaries and self-care and self-respect and self-love. Because without that, I am not in my divine soul essence. I am for everyone else, but not returning to me. I'm returning to this world, to the egoic sense of it and the attachments thereof, which will cause me to go into projection and suffering. So for me, it's been now, no, just speak truth. And if somebody doesn't connect to that truth, they're not meant to be part of that circle. And again, no judgment to the other person because they're also on a journey.
Yeah.
Whoever's on their journeys is that it takes them a time to get to that level of consciousness. And none of us are arriving or too enlightened. We're all on the journey.
True. Very true.
Yeah, I think it's time for
Corral, in
boundaries for
closing.
yourself, hey, Anissa? Putting those boundaries in place for you,
Yeah.
and making
Yes,
it all about you. Because then
in a
everything,
graceful way.
Yeah.
absolutely, and then everything else flows as it's meant to flow with
Yeah.
your environment around you. Because, like you say, if you stop the judgment for your with against yourself, if you put in the boundaries for yourself, then that automatically makes sure that you have the self-love in place. You have put the self-care in place, so it all comes back to us looking back within ourselves and claiming again, that full vessel that we've been brought into this world, um,
Mm.
to show up as.
Yeah. I agree.
I know I haven't acknowledged, but there's a lot of people on the Instagram. I'm not going to name all the names, but thank you for being here. We have not ignored you. Thank you for, again, Oh Natural 86 for your beautiful comment. Corral, in closing, because we've at the top of the hour, in fact, over the top of the hour, what would you like to share with as one golden nugget, given the theme being shifting from grudge to grit, grace, and gratitude, and
Mhm.
living this wild life in an unfiltered way? What are the gems you want to leave us with?
Let me see what comes through.
Hmm.
In just observing while even just being a part of this conversation, I think the one thing that I would leave is you're worth it. And I know it seems out of character to even say that right now, but you're worth it. Like this experience, you being here, there's a reason that you're here, right? Whatever that reason is for your own personal journey, discover that. This is such a gift. This thing called life is such a gift, and you get to do it differently each and every day. And that's the beautiful part is yesterday doesn't have to be today. Today doesn't have to be tomorrow. You get to do it over and over again. So if yesterday didn't go as you would have wanted it, if you didn't show up the way that you wanted to show up yesterday, you have the chance to do that today. You don't know if you have that chance tomorrow. So make the best of it because we don't know when this all ends for each of us. And it's making use of that and showing you, because you came here to be you, nobody else but you. So allow yourself to just be, and that's it.
Jamila,
Yeah.
I'm going to leave you to do the closing, but Corral, please do stay on for a brief, just a brief debrief
Yeah.
when we end the live.
Yeah, those are beautiful words, and indeed we are all worth it. And I always remember the saying that you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. And I think that was a very outward perspective when I think about it now. And when I think about it now, I realize that you do get a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth, because that impression that you're trying to make is the impression on you, and it
Yep.
has nothing to do with anyone else. So every day that you wake up, you have another chance to be a better you, a more impressive you, and not for anyone else, but for your own appreciation. So, Caurel, thank you so much. It was really, really so insightful listening to your story, and so motivating and inspiring. And I think that I certainly am more inspired to just take life as it comes, and if needs be to pack up and move to another space, then I'm going to do it with open arms and open heart. And thank you for that. Um, and everyone, all of our listeners that come in and week out, everyone who's come onto Instagram and LinkedIn and the YouTube, sharing the space with us, we appreciate you. Please do join us again next week when we will be back. And a big, big thank you to Anisa for showing up as always, irrespective of how you're feeling, how busy you are. We appreciate that, and hopefully that you will be strong and feeling much better next week when we come back.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to end the live and then also end Instagram.